super pleased to have Evie with us. I think she is an extra special sleep consultant because not only is she a sleep consultant, she is the mother of 3. She's also the mother of twins in that 3, and she's a paediatric nurse. So I feel absolutely privileged to have you here today, Evie, because I absolutely know that naps on the go is essential for your life. So without further ado, please introduce yourself and let us know all of your incredible tips and tricks.
Let's give it a go. Thanks ever so much for having me, Kathy. It's lovely to be here. I am Evie. I have been a nurse for nearly 20 years, so that's showing my age a little bit. And as Kathy said, I'm also a certified paediatric sleep consultant, and I do have 18-month-old twins. So everything we're going to talk about today is a little bit of my medical background, a little bit of my sleep consultant background, and a little bit of my mummy background. Because trust me, I have made mistakes, and I'm here to tell you how not to make them. And hopefully things will go better for you than they have done for me on occasion. So today we're going to talk about 3 main areas. We're going to talk about the planning, equipment, and the execution. And then towards the end, we'll have a little discussion about what to do when it doesn't go well, when it's all going sideways. And then to the people that submitted the questions, thank you very much. I will make sure I'll address them at the end. So, planning stage. So I'm going to talk to you as if you all have newborns, and I'll add a few examples for older children as well. It sounds very, very simple, but preparation will always be your best friend. Keep it simple. So if you have a newborn, don't plan to go out the entire day. Plan, right, this is my limitations. I've got a newborn. I'm new at this. This is my first baby. We're going to go around the block, okay? That is the most you should be planning and aiming towards with a newborn, unless you've got doctor's appointments. So think, right, tomorrow I'm going to try in the morning when it's nice and cool. I'm just going to go for a walk around the block. If baby is really upset for whatever reason, and there's so many reasons that newborns can be upset, you can go home to your safe space and retreat, and it'll get easier with time. If you've got an older child, or if you're getting a bit more used to it, the most important thing, pack everything you can the night before. Seems really, really simple, but if you've got a quiet 5 minutes, before you go to bed, before you start cluster feeding, if you're breastfeeding, just pack everything. So you want your breastfeeding covers, you want bottles, you want the hot water canister if you're going to take milk powder out, clothes, muslins, pacifiers if you're using them, snacks if you've got older children, you name it, pack it. My 2 most favourite things to pack to go anywhere, even now with older children, I've got an 8-year-old and I still use these for him sometimes. A small muslin. Now, most of the time I use this when you're changing them to dry them. Nappy rash, especially in Singapore, if you've got any moisture left, you're going to get horrible nappy rash. And that's worse when you're outside, especially if you're going for a walk and it's humid and hot. So if you're changing them out, and a good trick that I used to use when I was out and about was especially in a park, and I still do it now, is I lay the stroller flat and I change them in the stroller. The other one is a huge, if you can see how big it is, but a much bigger version of the same thing. Now, they are brilliant for everything, okay? If you forget to bring clothes, or you have explosions of any type, milk, the other end, you've got no clothes left, you can just wrap the baby in it until you get home. You can use it if you've got a very small baby and you might have been out and about somewhere and they're very upset. You can calm them by using it as a swaddle if you're out and about, if you've not got a swaddle bag with you. So they're great for everything. And clearing up restaurants when you've left a trail of destruction, you name it, they're perfect for everything. So the key for me to all of this is, and I'll say this again about a different topic, is to have a backup option. So if you're breastfeeding, it's slightly easier, especially in the early days, because if you're confident, then all you need is your breastfeeding cover, or if you don't want to cover, you don't need anything. You can just find a quiet spot to get comfortable. If you're mixed feeding or bottle feeding or doing a bit of expressing, anything like that, take a backup option. So by this I mean, if you're planning to go out for 1 feed or 2 feeds, take 3 or 4 bottles. take 3 or 4 sets of milk powder. I say this as a mum that's dropped numerous sterilised bottles on the floor. When someone will be talking to you or trying to take an order in a restaurant, you drop it on the floor, it's not sterilised anymore. And the same with the milk powder. If you've got sectioned off milk powder, sometimes you drop them, sometimes they spill. The importance of this is that it really lessens the anxiety when you're out and about. So if all of a sudden you've got no milk powder, or you know that you've got to get back for a certain time of a feed, it makes the whole situation more stressful. Whereas if you've got that backup option, it just, especially when you're starting out in your journey as a mum, it makes things calmer. And anything that makes the situation calmer is a good idea. I have been at the Botanical Gardens, at Gardens by the Bay, with no milk powder. My babies were asleep in the pushchair and had them. I was like, I've got this. They were very small. And yeah, I hadn't packed the milk powder because I hadn't packed it the night before, and had to rush home. And it was all fine in the end. But in that moment, I was super stressed. I was sweating. I was crying in the car. It was just horrible because you feel guilty. The babies were absolutely fine. But those are the things that if you just pack the night before, it makes it a little bit easier. And it builds in flexibility as well, because you don't know what's going to happen. Your friend might say, oh, stay for a bit longer and you're feeling okay. It might be a few more weeks postpartum, and it just gives you that flexibility to stay out a bit longer. The getting out the door, once you've done all that prep, is another difficult thing initially. It does get easier. For all you new mums out there that are still struggling to get out the door, it does get easier. My 2 top tips for this is get yourself ready first. It's not always possible, but if you are trying to get your handbag, brush your hair, or just put on a clean t-shirt so you've not got vomit on you, and you've got a child that's ready to sleep or is getting a bit anxious, that in itself is stressful. So you're already a little bit anxious and a little bit more stressed before you get out the door. So try and get yourself ready first if you can. If you have somebody to help you, a partner, or we're lucky to have helpers in Singapore, divide and conquer. So if you've got your partner with you, either they or you just concentrate on the baby. Get them changed, make sure they're well fed, and somebody else pack the bag. Somebody else get the pushchair out of the car, or somebody else get the pushchair ready, get the fan ready, get everything you need. If you have got a second person and a second pair of hands, don't try and do it all yourself. Don't feel that pressure. And it's good to do a mixture of both things. If you have got your partner, swap it around. You get the bag ready one day and they sort the baby out. And you need to be able, both parties, and maybe if you've got grandparents or a helper, everyone needs to be able to do everything. The load shouldn't be on one person, ideally. If you're on your own, it's different. But share the load and it makes it much easier. They're my top tips for actually leaving the house. Plan the night before, have a backup, divide and conquer if you can. It might seem overwhelming, but I promise it will get easier. The next stage is equipment. What are we going to use? How are we getting out? Where are we going? And what is the best thing to put your baby to sleep in? The answer is there's only 3 options really. You've got a car seat, you've got a stroller / pushchair, and you've got a baby carrier. With all of these options, for me, as a nurse, as a sleep consultant, and as a mum, flexibility is absolutely key. Flexibility and safety. So these are the 2 things that I'm going to talk about. Flexibility, because essentially your baby needs to be able to sleep in all of these things. And you need them to be okay with all options, because there may come a time when only one option is available. If you're going out in the car, they have to be okay with the car seat. If you're in an airport and you've forgotten your baby carrier, they have to be okay with the pushchair. If you've not got the pushchair, they need to be okay with the carrier, and vice versa. The more flexibility you have, the easier your life will be. So flexibility is key. Now, the biggest question I get asked by clients and by mum friends is, but how do you do it? How do you make any 3 of those options feel like you're at home? Do you get asked this a lot, Kathy, as well?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
So how do you make it feel like a bassinet, a cot, whatever you're using as your sleep environment at home? Now, I'm going to be a little bit controversial, and I want you to change your perspective. It is not your job to make a pushchair, a car seat, or a baby carrier feel like a cot. This is not our objective. Our objective is to practice with all three of these options enough so that your baby can sleep, probably only for one sleep cycle, which I'll talk about in more detail later, in all three of them. We don't have to make it dark. We don't have to make it really quiet. What we have to do is get your baby used to this situation. And this is really important. It may seem impossible now, but I'm here to tell you it's absolutely not impossible. It's going to be noisier, it's going to be lighter, they may not be flat. Practice makes perfect. We're going to practice all of these options as much as we can. A few useful tools are your iPhone has a white noise built into it. So if you are using white noise at home, you can put your iPhone into the little pocket on the back of your pushchair and play white noise if you find it helpful.
I used to do that all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Recently?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, life-changing. A lot of my clients use it now as well. I love it. So that's brilliant, and that can help. If your child is old enough, some children won't be, to use a teddy bear or a lovey or whatever they use at home, or if you choose to use a pacifier, that can be useful. But honestly, in these situations, on the go, movement is your friend. Keep moving and practice. And the other thing, again, and I'll come back, is have a backup option. So if you're going to a doctor's appointment and you're going in a cab and you're taking the car seat only, you don't know what's going to happen when you get to that doctor's appointment. You don't know if you're going to have bloods taken, if there's going to be a delay, if you're going to end up having a bit of a cluster feed while you're there. It can be useful to bring a pushchair so you can put the car seat on top of it. If you know your baby sleeps well and you're confident with them sleeping in the baby carrier, but you're trying the pushchair and it's not working, make sure you've got the baby carrier with you so you can go back to it if you need to, if you've got a really upset child. Okay.
I didn't go anywhere without my baby carrier.
Really?
It was always my backup. Yeah. Always.
It's a really good backup to have because they're so small and lightweight now. You can put them anywhere. Personally, for me, I didn't use them because I had two. And I know you can get these double ones now. But for me, it was just easier. Yeah, it was harder. So I just used the pushchair. But they work brilliantly well for many, many people and are a really, really good option. In terms of safety now, I feel like I need to talk about this. The manufacturer's recommendations for most car seats now are that a small baby, i.e. under 6 months of age, should not be in a car seat for longer than 2 hours. In Singapore, I understand the difficulties that presents because not most people don't have cars. So if you're going out, then you would put them in a car seat on top of the pushchair when they have those adapters. And that's absolutely fine, but I just want to highlight that shouldn't be a 6 to 8 hour trip out with a car seat only. The reason for this is that you're in a semi-upright position in a car seat, which with smaller babies particularly does put strain on the spine. And it's also not a recommended position for sleeping in. The recommendations even at home is that there's no incline. Those are the reasons, and you need to be mindful of them. If you're going on long car journeys, just stop regularly, get them out and try and minimise it as much as you possibly can. In Singapore, I don't think we really face that problem very often.
And like you say, the thing is, we're not talking about an entire 2 hour trip out that is ever really likely to be 2 hours, because in that it does count as a break if you're getting them out to feed them, if you're getting them out to lay them down and change their nappy. And I mean, you've already briefly mentioned the typical length of a nap, especially if you're out and about. Yeah. If you've got a baby that is frequently napping for longer than 2 hours on the go in a car seat, well,
be a miracle, I think.
We need to learn their tricks.
Absolutely. They need to be teaching me a thing or two. The next thing I wanted to talk about was stroller or pushchair covers. There was a Swedish study. In this study, the people that conducted it put a pushchair in direct sunlight with a cover over it completely, so there was no airflow, and put a thermometer inside it. It does demonstrate a point. We should not be covering our children's strollers in Singapore. This is my professional advice. Other countries that have got safety tested devices, it may be different. If you are in a pushchair or stroller specifically, and you've got a large muslin, just like the one I had here, or you can get UV covers, things like that. We don't want to be limiting air circulation or flow to your baby. When you cover them with anything, and there's some studies have tested different covers, they've tested pure cotton, they've tested polyester, all of them do exactly the same thing. They prevent airflow and increase the heat inside that stroller/pushchair. So we don't want to be doing it. And the other thing to think about is that most pushchairs are dark in colour. Do they absorb heat, and especially in Singapore? Is this something that you've seen a lot, Kathy, yourself?
Very much so, and I'm quite passionate about this subject as well, because you can buy the special clips, that people use to put the muslins on, like the big like clothes hanger clips, and trying to educate people how to create a safe environment out and about that blocks out the direct sun, and maybe is more conducive to sleep. But helping them understand some of the physiology of the baby, the fact that their sweat glands, aren't working. So they've got no way of regulating their temperature, which is fundamentally a really dangerous little place for them to be if you're not watching them. And even if you are watching them, you won't see beads of sweat on them because they can't sweat in that way yet. Finding different ways of providing shade. I don't know, I'm sure you've got some great advice, but I found I had 2 different shades. So I would go with the one that came with the pushchair, but then I also got a mobile like umbrella that fitted on, so I could fit it onto different places and move it around depending, so that I could create as much shade as possible.
They're the best option. If you're trying to get your child out of direct sunlight and you're walking outside, especially in Singapore, the umbrellas that attach to the pushchair, they are really good. They attach and you can move them around. They don't block the airflow, but they prevent direct sunlight from hitting your child. So that's the best option. The other option for helping them to cool down as well if you're walking outside is a mobile fan. Now, a lot of people have them. The older your child gets, it gets a little bit more difficult because they tend to like to touch them and move them. So with older children, the best thing is to just try and get them to sleep first, and then you can put it on them. So that's a bit of a trick. These ones are good. I'll turn it around. Can you see these legs on it? The legs, you can wrap them around anything. And like I said, it doesn't have to be dark. It doesn't have to be uber quiet. Keep moving. Don't feel like you have to create that dark environment when you're outside, because you don't. The thing to remember about all of your options and your backup is never leave your children, and especially young babies, well, any babies really, unsupervised in any of these options. We shouldn't be leaving them in the car if they fall asleep. We shouldn't be leaving them, in the pushchair if they're fallen asleep and you go in the house and do some jobs. And it is great to be able to get your children to nap on the go, but we have to think sensibly and practically. They are not for long periods of time, sleeping time, and don't leave them unsupervised in any of these options. So what's next? Execution. Now, everyone's like, oh, this is the hardest bit. No, it isn't. All you need to do is practice. I promise. Now, the most important thing about execution is timing. This is age dependent. We've got to get timing right for babies. Timing will be the difference between a child that A, is overtired and will fight it, or B, is completely not tired enough and will fight it. For most children, going to sleep on the go, maybe not a baby carrier, but let's say, a car seat, especially a pushchair, is harder than it's going to be for them at home if they're used to napping regularly at home, until you get over that hurdle. Some children take to it like, a duck to water, and they're out and about, and as soon as you put them in the pushchair, they're asleep, and you're like, yes, I'm going to have a cup of coffee in peace and read my book for 20 minutes. But a lot of children will find it harder to fall asleep outside because it is louder, brighter, and there's loads more going on. So you've got to get the timing right. Now, I'll give 2 examples, but regardless of the age of your child, try to leave the house 10 minutes minimum before the end of an awake window, okay? We don't want to be taking an overtired, exhausted child out and trying to get them used to a new sleeping environment. You're giving yourself, doing yourself no favours from the start. So if possible, time it well. And this is where the planning stage comes in, because if you are 8 weeks into your postpartum journey and you've got a bit of a rhythm going, and you know that if you do a breastfeed, roughly you've got at least an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours before they need another feed, hopefully, then as soon as you've fed them, you've burped them. With newborns, go. Leave the house. So newborn is literally, if you've got imagine though, an awake window for a newborn is roughly about 45 minutes. So if they wake up and feed for half an hour, some babies take a bit less, some babies will take a bit more, depending on how you're feeding them. Make sure you've burped them well. Make sure they're nice and comfortable. You want to get out before the end of that 45-minute awake window. So with newborns, it's a feed and run situation. So get everything ready before you sit down to start feeding them. Keep touching my boobs, but you know what I mean? If you're
occupational hazard.
Right? Or bottle feeding. Feed and run with a newborn. Let's do the example of a 4-month-old. A 4-month-old has roughly got an awake window of 2 hours, okay? So with a 4-month-old, you probably want to feed them and then give them the adequate awake window, leaving that 10 to 15 minutes at the end. So try and stimulate them if you can. Adequate stimulation for a 4-month-old is lying on the playmat, looking at his things, looking at mummy for a bit, and a little bit of tummy time. Nothing too exhausting. While they're on the playmat, you can finish getting your bag ready if you're on your own, get ready to go. And then you take them out, let's say a pushchair, you're going to take them out in the pushchair with 10 minutes to go before they're due for the next nap, okay?
Can I be so rude as to jump in actually with a real life example there for you? Because what you just, and I didn't realise at the time that I was doing it so right, because when my little one was born was 6 years ago. So that was before I knew you, before I was actually even a certified doula. But looking back around that same time, around the 4-month mark, my daughter's wake up time was 7 a.m.
Yeah.
And around that time, her first morning nap would be 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And around 8:30, I was making sure she would have been fed. And around 8:30, I was putting on my, I was going to say my decent shorts, my shorts with less, breast milk over them, and my t-shirt with less breast milk over them, and putting on my trainers. And by 8:45, she was in the baby carrier, and we were out the door every single morning. And I mean, and that moved as her awake window moved, but the same process happened, and it just made me realize that exactly what you said was what I was doing around that 4-month mark.
And when to have that, did that make you feel better to know that you were leaving the house in the morning?
100%. It gave me so much confidence because she was so used to that nap. That nap was, it was cement, it was gold, as long as I timed it right. And I knew when I didn't. If I was late, I knew that I was late because it was harder. I did have to work harder, walk faster, jiggle a bit more, right? All of those things to make it happen. But it was a lovely feeling. I got my favourite coffee. I got my favourite toasted sandwich. And yes, she got crumbs on her head every single morning. But
and that's why it's so important to practice getting out and practice all of these different things. The stroller, the car seat, and the baby carrier. It's so important to be able to have that freedom, not just for the baby, but for you. Like, that is sanity, and it still is my sanity. I mean, I think you saw Kathy today. I was out this morning. I was out with the bike trailer. My eldest was on his bike, and I had the bike trailer out. And before that, it took me an hour to leave the house this morning. An hour, and it's still difficult at times. But we got to the park. We were all still alive, and we all felt better. And this is why I'm so passionate about getting out and getting your children used to these different environments, because it's good for everybody. The other thing about timing and execution is, as you do get into that routine, and this is a really important thing that I always tell my clients, the eat, play, sleep routine which I know you use as well, Kathy, is a form of communication with your baby from a very young age. If you've implemented that, and that's not, it doesn't have to be rigid. Some days the wait windows are longer, some days they need feeding sooner, but a very gentle eat, play, sleep routine, that form of communication enables your baby to know what's coming next. They feel safe and they feel secure. So just because you're out and about, you shouldn't stop that very important form of communication. So by feeding them and allowing them to get to sleep roughly around the same time that they normally would at home, you're continuing that form of communication with them, and that again makes it much easier for them to nap on the go. Okay, so it is really important. Now, I get asked this question again a lot is, well, what happens if they only sleep for one sleep cycle? The answer is, with younger children that are on anywhere between 2 and 5 or 6 naps a day, it doesn't matter. All sleep is restorative. I'm sure this is what you tell your clients as well, Kathy, right? If let me give you an example. If you have a baby that's 4 to 6 months old that's on a 3-nap schedule a day, if 2 of those naps are short naps, that's absolutely fine. If 3 are short, it's not ideal. You might have a grumpier baby, and there's things you can probably do to improve that, but that's also okay. What I would always say is the best time to go out is the first awake window, just as you did with your daughter, Kathy. If you're really trying to get used to naps on the go, always try the first awake window. It's the easiest one to get them to sleep. If you're on a 3-nap day, by the 3rd nap, getting them to sleep can be really, really difficult. Even if you're at home and you've got the darkness and you've got the white noise, and you might have to have a contact nap if your baby's younger, the last nap of the day. So always try. Again, it's timing. Timing is everything. It's not just when to go, time-wise in terms of their wait window, but the time of day is also really important. And it makes it easier on everybody. So that first awake windows is the best.
And it works amazing for Singapore because of the heat, actually. I find, that is, the sun has been low, obviously, throughout the evening. Everything is cooler at that time of day. Even trying to go out just before bedtime, which I know a lot of people like to try and do. Singapore, we've had the whole day for everything to warm up.
It can be nice to get out in the evenings, and maybe if you've got a newborn that's perhaps not got that rigid fixed bedtime yet, is feeding regularly until maybe 10. It can be nice to get out in the evening and just give yourself that break. And with newborns, it's easier to get them to sleep as well, don't forget, and they'll sleep more frequently. So it depends on the age of your child, but do what works for you. But if you're really struggling with a child over 10, 12 weeks old, the last nap of the day is going to be the hardest time to try. The other thing I want to mention here as well is if you get appointments, so typically doctor's appointment, osteopath you might be going to see, or a physio, things like this, they'll give you an appointment time. Don't be afraid to push back. If it doesn't suit you, or you've got into a really good routine with your baby, don't be afraid to say, actually, no, I can't do that time. Oh, well, we've not got an appointment for another 4 days. Well, is it an urgent appointment, or is it just a checkup? If it's just a checkup, it can wait 4 days until you've got the right appointment time for me, because that, again, lessens anxiety and gives you that flexibility. With my 2, when they were on 2 naps a day, all my doctor's appointments would be in the middle of the day, because they'd nap in the morning. I'd get them to wherever we were going with a short nap in the morning. And then if I had doctor's appointments, they would be between 11 and 1, because they'd go back down to sleep roughly about 2 o'clock. So don't be afraid to say, actually, that's a really bad time. And I think that comes into play more as your baby gets older. When they're under 8 weeks, as you know, Kathy, they will sleep every 45 minutes to an hour, and they're much easier to get to sleep. So don't be afraid to say, actually, I definitely can't do that ridiculous time that you've just given me. And in their defense, they don't know that, it's not a good time for you. So just let them know. Say,
and I think people will be surprised at how many providers, when they are reminded, will actually aim to be as accommodating as possible. Often the person on the admin desk doesn't have an awareness of this. It's not their job necessarily to think that through. But certainly the osteopaths that you and I know, just a little jog and go, actually, guys, that really doesn't work with, my baby's sleep rhythms. And the osteopath would 100% understand that, because everything they do is about maximizing and empowering you through feeding and sleep obstacles. So,
absolutely. And it's the same with the pediatricians as well. The person on reception might always not know, understand what you're about to try and do, get out of the house with a newborn or even an older baby, but definitely the pediatrician will understand. 100%. And I mean, the latter part of my career in Singapore, I was a clinic manager at IMC, and we always worked around naps and things. And don't be afraid. I know it's hard, and especially when you postpartum and you feel quite vulnerable, you'll just agree to anything because you're not feeling at your best, and you find it harder to advocate for yourself. I found it, from a personal point of view, harder to advocate for myself when I was postpartum. But there are so many people out there that will understand and support you. So do what's right for you and your baby. All right.
And I would add the same goes with play dates or money meetups. That can actually be the hardest ones to, feel empowered and say that doesn't work for me because of my baby's, nap or sleep rhythm. Because, there's a lot of opinions.
I had a similar situation. Finally decided, right, I'm going to leave the house with these two. I can do it. I'm going to take them to playgroups. All the playgroups were at nap time. I was like, what is this? Why? I did manage to find a class that was at 11 o'clock. So what I would do is, when they're on a 2 nap a day schedule, when they're a bit older, get them in the car. They'd nap for half an hour in the car on the way there. And then I'd wake them up, give them a bottle of milk, and then they'd do the playgroup from 11 till 12. So there are a lot of classes in Singapore as well that have different times. So absolutely, don't be afraid to say a 9 to 10 o'clock playgroup is not going to work for me. Because ultimately it's you that's got the grumpy child that sat in a playgroup that just wants to go to sleep, and it's miserable for everybody, right? So, yeah.
100%.
Now, when should we not try and go out and about? Now, I think this is important as well, because again, societal pressure, your friends are going out, or there's a new mum support group network meetup, which are amazing, by the way, I go to lots, and you want to be out, but the reality is life gets in the way sometimes. So if they're sick, I mean, after COVID, most people won't expose their other people's children to sickness, because we're never 100% sure whether it's COVID or not. But if they are sick, it will be much harder for them to get to sleep. So if you are struggling and you're in that stage where you're still practicing all of your options, I would just stay at home for a couple of days, just make it easy on yourself. The last awake window of the day can be the absolute hardest. So if you are still just in the practicing stage, try to avoid the last awake window of the day. Now, the other time that I tell my clients to avoid trying to nap on the go is a transition to one nap. I always advocate for getting out and about as much as possible, but this can be a really hard transition for a lot of children. If you've got children that are doing 2 naps a day and you've decided, you've looked at all the key identifiers, which I won't go into, and yes, you've decided that they need to go to one nap, you've got to get potentially a nap that was at 10 o'clock to now 12 o'clock. So your baby will still be tired between 9 and 10 for weeks and weeks and weeks, okay? They'll be a bit more grumpy. They'll be a bit more hungry. And with my clients, I always make that transition very, very gradual, over sometimes 6 to 8 weeks. That's how long some children need, and that's fine. Some children can do it in 2 weeks, but some can't. So if you are out and about during this time, because you're consolidating 2 sleeps to one, if that one nap is only 40 minutes, they will really, really struggle to get to the end of the day. So it is a transition period. It is a little bit frustrating, but it's only a few weeks. And I think for the benefit of the whole family and your children. Now, I had 2. So for me, I did not want screaming children at 5 o'clock. And if they had only slept for 40 minutes during that transition, all hell would have broken loose, I didn't want to deal with it either. And you've got to do what works for your family. If you don't have support and you've got older children, this can be really, really difficult. It's hard sometimes. In Singapore, we have the luxury of having support. A lot of people do. So it's easier. If you don't, and you have to go and collect children from school and things like that, don't worry too much. Just really try to push your child and to increase the awake window every few days. But I'm here to tell you, it does get better.
I think that will resonate with a lot of people that worry when they do have the shorter naps if they're on the go, knowing what the fix is. I know we've said, you'll be able to catch up. There's other naps in the day. And maybe you'll get to this, Evie, but my thing has always been, there is still always bedtime to recover this. You can still always bring bedtime forward. Tomorrow is another day.
100%. And I think there's a huge misconception around bringing bedtime forward. People think that if you bring bedtime forward, they will wake up super early in the morning. And that is not the case. That's not the case at all. If your baby has the capacity to sleep for 14 hours, by bringing bedtime, and then they've only slept for an hour in the day instead of 2 hours, by bringing bedtime forward, all you're doing is allowing them to catch up on that sleep debt. I think it's really important to let them recover. If they've had a rubbish nap day, put them to bed at 6:30, 100%. And I think that's why it's difficult with the transition from 2 to 1 nap, because that 1 nap, you do want it to be a good nap. And during that transition, it might not always be good, and that's part of the course. And again, don't panic, just bring bedtime forward. But if you're on the go, it just adds an extra level of stress that you just don't need. So I would always try and get that nap at home. In terms of long term for older children, I also wanted to just touch on this a little bit. I had a friend visiting recently from the UK. Her youngest, she's got 3 children, had just turned 2. And she was like, oh, let's go to Bouncy Paradise at 12 o'clock. I said, yes, of course, me and my 8-year-old will join you at 8 o'clock, but my 18-month-old will not. And she's like, oh, but I completely understand that she's on holiday. She doesn't want to stay at home for naps. And she's got 2 older children of 10 and 8. So she let him sleep in the car. For the maximum he would ever sleep in the car was about 50 minutes. And they were here for 2 weeks and they were absolutely fine. Now it was my choice not to disrupt my routine, because mine will sleep for 2 hours at lunchtime. And she was, winding me up a little bit about it. But if you are on holiday and you've got a child that's over 2, don't feel like you have to go back to the hotel or stay at home for naps. Children will recover. And you'll get home after your 2-week holiday and they'll get back into that routine. Just put them to bed earlier. Give them time to catch up. For us, again, the other side to that coin is that when we're on holiday, we all go to sleep at lunchtime because it's too hot to be outside by the beach. So there's 2 sides to it. And even my 8-year-old loves it because he gets to watch TV for an hour. So it depends what camp you are in. But I just want to stress that there's a camp for everyone. It doesn't have to be one or the other, If you've got 3 children and you want to be out and about doing things your entire holiday, it's fine. All sleep is restorative. So if they nap for 45 minutes in the car when you're on holiday, it's fine. When it's not going well, what can we do? I'll do this last little bit and then we'll move to some questions. The key thing, and I'm sure you've all heard this before, but I do like to reiterate it. If you've got a really upset crying baby, especially when they're younger, there might not be any reason for it, try and stay calm. They will pick up on your signals. So if you're anxious because people are looking at you, or if you're anxious because you're worried about your baby, try and move yourself to a quiet, cool place. Now that might be in a shopping centre, a shopping mall somewhere, in a corner of a coffee shop. If you're in a doctor's office, go into the corner of the doctor's office. Try and stay calm. It's important to note that if you have been out and about for a whole awake window, and you've got younger children, that is quite a lot of stimulation for them. They may be hungrier quicker than if you were at home. So if you're breastfeeding and you can calm your baby by breastfeeding them, that's always a great option. And even if you're bottle feeding them, you may think, oh, well, I only fed them an hour and a half or 2 hours ago. They still may be hungry. So you can try and give them a feed to calm them down. It is always an option. And then you can also use some of the methods that we talked about earlier. So if you're using pacifiers, they can help. If you're using white noise, that can help. And if all else fails, use your backup option. So if you know that your baby, will sleep in a baby carrier, try and get them to sleep in a baby carrier. If you've got your timing right, the maximum they should protest for on the way to going to sleep is about 20 minutes. And eventually, most children will fall asleep, especially the younger ones. If you're at the other end of your wake window and you've got stuck somewhere, I know how stressful that can be, but just try and stay calm, try and feed them, use all the methods that you would at home. Try to not be bothered by what's going on around you or who's looking at you. If you feel calmer and safer, try and find the best breastfeeding room. A lot of shopping centres have them now. And if you're at the doctor's office, a lot of them will allow you to use an empty consultation room. So don't be afraid to ask for help if you're really struggling. And you'd be surprised how many people are willing to help you. If it's a disaster, don't write it off. Get home, get calm, get your baby calm, and try again tomorrow. It's horrible at the time, and I'm sure you see this a lot, Kathy, but tomorrow's a new day, and just keep trying.
Don't think we can emphasize that enough, really. The gentle consistency. I mean, this counts probably for everything to do with parenting. You know, gentle consistency will win through. You know, just doing the same things gently at the same time every day will ultimately win over. You know, you will find the way that it will fall into place.
And it's very gentle. It's very much like sleep training. You push them gently in that direction, and eventually they catch on. And they're not going to catch on every day, but that's okay. Sometimes they will sleep on you. Just keep going. So I hope that was useful. If you do have any questions and I haven't answered them, please do reach out anytime. For the people that pre-submitted questions, thank you very much. I'll go through them now if that's okay with you, Kathy.
I'd love you to.
First question was, if you are out with a baby in a baby stroller and got caught in the middle of a mall or in public transport and the baby cries and for milk, what should you do to comfort the baby to stop the hungry cries until you find a nursing room? It's a very good question. I think it's a very personal question. I think some people would be comfortable to put the breastfeeding cover over them and feed them where they were, whether that was public transport or in a shopping mall. Some people are not. If you're not comfortable doing that, then you can try taking them out and doing all the things that you would at home if you're not quite ready to sit down and breastfeed. What do you think, Kathy? I mean, just holding them close to you until you can find somewhere that you feel comfortable breastfeeding. Using a pacifier if you're using.
Absolutely. I mean, sucking in general is normally a good way to pacify them, even if they're not a pacifier user, even if you don't have a pacifier with you. If you've got clean hands or a way to clean your hands, let them to suck on a finger, a thumb, or a clean, safe toy, something that they can use to stimulate that suck action will normally get them through. I've found myself in both situations where I felt awkward to breastfeed and surprisingly got quite forcibly told by the older generations, you know, just feed type thing. Yeah. But I've equally been in the other situation where I've got, you know, been on the MRT and thought, oh, I'll fix this, I'll feed. Yeah. And, you know, got some really awkward looks and thought, oh, okay, this crowd isn't up for this. So, you know, that what I think you can definitely play by ear depending on how confident you are and where you are. And I know in Singapore, feeding in general on public transport, depending on which staff you speak to, you get like different responses on that one.
I think it's about going with the option that suits you best. If you are confident, then I would always say just feed. If you're not so confident, hold them close to you quite firmly. Patting can help. And this, like Kathy said, the sucking reflex is excellent. And most shopping centres now, and even if you are in a busy, you know, if the shopping centre doesn't have somewhere to feed, if you go into a restaurant and order a coffee, normally there's a quiet corner that you could find that's not overlooked, things like that. But it is a difficult one, and I personally didn't manage to breastfeed for longer than 2 weeks with all three of my children. So for me, it was never an issue. It is a difficult one, but I don't want that to. As you go on your breastfeeding journey, and I'm sure you see this as well, Kathy, you get more confident. You get more confident with your latch. You get more confident with knowing how well they've fed, and you get more confident being out and about feeding. So if you are new to it, again, the more you do it, the more confident you'll get. So don't let that put you off. And if you get your timing right, which is what we talked about earlier, feed and run. Feed, and then, get them to sleep for 45 minutes. And then by that time, you should be able to plan that you could be somewhere that you could breastfeed. So planning will always be your best friend as well. Okay.
And generally speaking, I'd also say know your route. Know the places that you normally go to. I quite often joke with clients and give them scenarios. I'm like, do you know how to get from A to B with a pushchair in Singapore? My particular favourite is getting from Wheelock to Tangs.
I have been caught there so many times. There is
Yes, whichever way round you go. The trick is to go down to the MRT and to use the MRT lifts is the trick there. But also little things like knowing, I always say follow the bumps. I don't know if you'll know what I mean about follow the bumps on the MRT, but the little silver dots on the floor. Again, I make a point of telling twin mums this because it will show you the way to go for a twin size double pushchair. But knowing your quick access routes in and out of places, and on the MRT, that is following the bumps on the floor because it will show you the access routes to the lifts.
Love that.
So yeah, knowing and knowing where your favorite coffee shops are, where these things are along most of your most traveled routes,
and your safe place. Definitely knowing where you can feed, especially when you're new to it. The next question is how to make sure that babies can nap peacefully outside of their usual home environment. I think we've touched on that quite a lot. Practice makes perfect, and planning and timing, all the things that we've just talked about are really important. Use your white noise if you feel like you need to. Make sure they're a good right temperature and cool. Must it be a single sleep cycle of 45 minutes? Say I bring my baby out in the neighbourhood for a 15-minute walk in a carrier. Is that an interruption, or is it recommended to do a full sleep cycle, a walk for 30 to 45 minutes? It's an interesting question because when you've got a much younger baby, I would say it probably doesn't matter. I think you'd agree, Kathy. But I think when you've got an older baby that's probably, heading towards 8 to 10 weeks, you would really want them to sleep for at least one sleep cycle. Do you agree, Kathy?
Yeah, I would absolutely be like, Mum, keep going. Keep walking.
Just keep walking.
Keep walking. Count your steps.
Well. Yeah.
Count your steps.
Yeah. So I would, as a nurse, as a sleep consultant, as a mum, I would go for one sleep cycle for everybody's benefit, 100%. Yeah.
I also can't drink a coffee in 15 minutes. It would take me the 30, 45 minutes to drink the one coffee that I need in the morning to get through. So, yeah, keep walking, relax, drink your coffee.
100%. Oh, dear. So, yeah, I hope that's helpful. My 5-week-old wakes up and cries shortly after we put him down to bed, or could only sleep for half an hour. Help. Well, firstly, that is really, really hard. Don't panic. It won't last forever, and it's not uncommon. There is lots of things that could be causing this. It could be a feeding issue. It could be that he really wants to be close to you. It's difficult to say without having a lot more information. And I'm more than happy, if you want to talk to me about this, if you need help, please do reach out to me. But I would need quite a lot more information to try and help you get him to sleep for longer than half an hour. But with a 5-week-old, half an hour burst of sleep can be absolutely normal as well. Give him chance. Give him chance. Establish feeding, whether that's bottle feeding or breastfeeding. Just give him chance. If you're really struggling, reach out to me. There could be lots of reasons for this. Awake windows, overtired, feeding. Just give him time. Keep practicing. Don't stop trying to put him in his crib. I think that's really important. You might need to give him help. It might be that you only try to put him down once a day at 5 weeks old, and that's fine. The other times you may need to hold him and rock him and pat him to sleep. All of those things are absolutely fine. It's complicated with a 5-week-old, as I'm sure Kathy knows. They need a lot more support to get to sleep at that age, and that's absolutely fine. It is a hard time, right, Kathy? Yeah. It's a hard age.
Absolutely. And I would urge anyone in that situation to reach out with, like you say, some more specific details, because the two two key things that come to my mind are the feeds, full and efficient, and are they happening within a suitable awake time? If feeds are happening and they're taking too long and baby is getting overtired and using up too many calories during that, awake window, or are they, napping, and not building up their sleep pressure? But typically at that age, I guess that's probably not the issue. But definitely reach out, give a little bit more information about what the feeds are like and the awake periods. And I know you, Evie, can
I'd be more than happy to help. Next question is regarding twins. I always have one twin that doesn't sleep on their naps, more so when we are on the go and outside. They also can fall asleep and then last 10 minutes and then be awake again. Oh, this sounds very familiar. A great question. Thank you for this. Twins, 9 times out of 10 have different sleep needs. That is my experience with my clients and with my own children. So don't assume that one twin needs the same awake window and amount of sleep as the other twin would. In regards to them only falling asleep and lasting 10 minutes, without knowing how old they are, I would think that that's probably a timing issue again. So we probably need to maximize their awake windows before you go out. It may be that one twin needs a longer awake window than the other, and you have to meet somewhere in the middle with twins. So I never recommend putting them down at different times. I allow them to sleep for longer at the other end of it, but I don't recommend putting them down at different times. Now, this means that this twin that has higher sleep needs will be a bit more grumpy, and the twin that can have a longer awake window will be like fighting it a little bit. What tends to happen is that you meet somewhere in the middle. So if you've got a half an hour difference in the sleep needs of your twins, meet in the middle. So the one that needs to go to sleep a bit sooner is 15 minutes a bit grumpy and a little bit overtired, but the one that can probably push it another 15 minutes is a bit less tired. The noises that they make with my clients and with mine, they get used to it. When they're in the same room, they get used to each other's noises. So that's how you meet in the middle in terms of finding the right time to go out. It is difficult for me to tell without knowing how old they are, what their awake windows and stuff should be. Again, if you want to reach out, I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it, because we can definitely get them napping for longer than 10 minutes. We just need to time it right. It is more tricky with twins, but it's definitely not impossible. And dependent on age, for me personally, as they got older, it got harder for me because my twin that needs less sleep would really, really resist naps. So I'd be in a situation where she would take half an hour to fall asleep on the go. My other twin would have fallen asleep within 10 minutes. And by the time he woke up, she'd only just fallen asleep. That was specifically on the go. So it's a bit trickier. But with that situation, again, you just keep moving so that the twin that's only just fallen asleep still gets to nap for at least 20 minutes. I hope that's helpful. If you need more help with this, again, more than happy to help. It's a fine balance and a fine line. And even now at 18 months, one of my twins normally sleeps for half an hour less in the day than the other one. And I just take them out of the cot and let the other one sleep for half an hour. I always use a half an hour rule as well. I'm not sure if you do this as well, Kathy, but my rule for twins is half an hour. After half an hour, if one twin's been asleep for half an hour longer than the other, wake them up. The key to surviving twins is to keep them on the same schedule. But I'm talking over 8 to 12 weeks. We really need to be getting them nail that same schedule. It takes time.
Just a thought on that. Would this be where having that backup probably would be a baby carrier could actually start to, when they're very little, be a real asset? Because if you've got one baby that needs to sleep longer, or one baby that needs to maybe go down a little bit sooner, something like that, knowing which one sleeps in a carrier and doesn't sleep in a carrier, would that enable you to potentially be on the go and meet each of their needs?
100%. If you felt comfortable pushing a pushchair and carrying the one that's finding it harder to go to sleep because they're not quite sleepy enough, and you know that they're going to sleep better in the carrier, fantastic idea. 100%. Do what you've got to do. You want them to sleep at the same time, but the reality is they're not going to do that on the go. And if you can put one in the carrier so that they sleep within 10 minutes of the other one, it's a fantastic idea. It's about working out their sleep needs. And I think that's often where I can help the most, is to work out sleep needs, because I'll set a fairly rigid schedule initially and then loosen it a lot when I've managed to work out my client's sleep needs with sleep logs and things like that. So that's, for me, that's key, not just with twins, with all my clients. I can, over the course of a few days to a week, if I can look at sleep logs, nap times, I can kind of gauge nicely what sleep needs there are. And that helps with on-the-go naps as well, because it helps us to work out when it's best to place them and when it's best to not place them. So if you need anything, just let me know. I do consult-only sessions as well. So if you're doing well and you don't need full 2-week support from me, we can just have a chat over the phone. Next question, is it normal for a 2-month newborn to only sleep 30 minutes each time during the day? Yes, it can be. Kathy, I'm sure you encounter this a lot with your clients, right?
Yes. Yeah. The sleep needs, and trying to rationalize them and get into a rhythm that you think they should be doing. It takes some fine tuning, and yeah, I get that question a lot.
Yeah, and it is normal, and at some point they will sleep longer than 30 minutes. I promise. But again, it's about nurturing that really good routine from very early on. A nice full feed, adequate awake time, and then put them down to sleep. So I can't stress how important that is. And over time, because you're communicating with your baby through that routine, they will feel secure enough to sleep for longer. Sleeps, and I don't think I talk about this enough sometimes. Sleep is very much related to security and the personality of the baby. Some babies do need to feel a lot more secure before they will sleep for longer chunks and independently without a parent very close by, and that's absolutely normal as well. So stick with it, you'll get there. It is normal. Again, if you need help getting that routine, more than happy to help, as I'm sure Kathy is as well. And last question is, my baby fights sleep a lot, even at home. She wants to be up and awake and interacting and learning, but gets cranky and even fusses at the boob because she gets overtired. How to get her to rest effectively outside? I think we've touched on this a lot, but again, it's about timing. You need to feed them when they're not tired and cranky. That's key. I'm not sure how old this baby is, so I can't say specifically timings and things, but feed, play, sleep. So you want to be taking them out when they've got a nice full tummy, they've had a nice awake window, and they're ready to sleep. It will be harder. Given that she wants to be interacting and looking around and awake and things, I think this is a bit of an older baby. They will. Keep moving. Keep practicing. Use the arm of the umbrella. Sometimes it helps if they can't see your face, because sometimes they want to interact with you, and that can be a big reason people cover their strollers a lot as well. So you can use the arm of the umbrella so that they can't see you, and then they're like, well, mummy's not there, it's boring, I'm just going to go to sleep. Keep practicing and try to feed her when she's just woken up so that she's not cranky, because if you're trying to feed a tired baby a full feed, or they won't take it, and then they'll be hungrier sooner because they've not taken a full feed. So it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle. Work on your timing and keep practicing. I promise it'll get there eventually.
And I don't think we can stress enough the link between full feeding and good sleeping. Snack feeding leads to snack sleeping. Snack sleeping leads to snack feeding. The two are so intertwined
100%.
that if you really are finding yourself in a cycle that feels, your gut is telling you, I've been in this short nap cycle for too long, then speak to someone, because it may be the feeding. It may be that someone can support you through making sure your baby has a fuller feed that will then empower them to have a longer sleep.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about feeding, and recently we were discussing about pumping as well, and getting the right flange size, and it's really important, all these things that you wouldn't know about if you've never breastfed before, if you're pumping and then bottle feeding, or even if you're not pumping. There's a myriad of things that can affect how full feed you're giving your baby. And I'm definitely not an expert in that. Kathy's fantastic at that kind of thing. But we also work with some fantastic lactation consultants and midwives who can sit with you, as Kathy can, and say, right, we're going to do things a bit differently and see if it makes a difference. And it's trial and error. And you're not necessarily doing anything wrong, but if somebody can optimize that feeding for you, it can make a huge world of difference, massively. And that happens a lot to my clients. And unless you're in this space, and I've been a nurse for 20 years, and it was a huge struggle for me. I think getting help and support early on is key. The more help you get from day one, the more enjoyable your parenting journey will be. I can't stress that enough. And I think that's why I love Pregnant and Popped, and I've loved working with you, Kathy, because that is the message that we're trying to get out there.
And like you say, it's about creating a village that's, empowered with all of this evidence-based advice. Yeah. That's not there to lay any judgment or tell anyone how to parent. It's just there to give them, empowered choices so that they can parent how they want to.
Yeah, it's that scaffolding and support, and within that, everyone does it differently. But you've got that scaffolding to support you and hold you up that whole time. For me, with my clients, I use quite a few different methods, and that's absolutely fine. Not one child sleeps the same. We're all different. We're all human. Not one adult sleeps the same. It's about having that support on your journey. And with that, I think I've answered all the questions. I hope it was useful.
I don't know how to say thank you enough, because you've covered so much, and you have given us so much more than you even promised to give us. You promised to talk about naps on the go, and you've basically given us a pretty extensive consultation.